A man should so live that his happiness depends as little as possible on external things. Epictetus. There are moments in a man's life when silence becomes unbearable. Not the silence of the world around him, but the silence inside, where once a voice lived. A voice that stood tall, that challenged falsehood, that refused to kneel. That voice, once brave, is now gone. And he knows it. He hears the quietness of a soul that no longer fights. He does not speak because he has nothing to say. He does not act because he has long surrendered the right to command himself. And the weight he carries is not from the world pressing down upon him, but from himself collapsing inward. This is the condition of the weak man. Not the man who is physically frail, nor the one born into hardship. No. Weakness is not circumstance, it is permission. The weak man is the one who has allowed his strength to atrophy. Who has chosen comfort over principle, peace over truth, softness over spine. He may smile. He may even seem liked. But inside, he knows, he is not respected. And worst of all, he does not respect himself. Once, he believed that kindness would win love. That gentleness would preserve peace. That silence would keep him safe. He was taught to be agreeable, to avoid confrontation, to apologize for being firm. And for a time, it worked. He was praised, welcomed, even admired, for being easy to handle. But what was truly admired? His absence of edge. His willingness to bend. His ability to disappear in a crowd of louder voices. Soon, he realized, admiration built on compliance is not respect, it is convenience. And no one respects a man who only exists to please. He began to feel it in the smallest of things. A conversation, where his words were dismissed. A meeting, where his opinion was never asked. A relationship, where his boundaries were tested, and he failed to defend them. Every time he avoided discomfort, a piece of him decayed. Every time he said yes out of fear, not conviction, his will was undermined. And every time he remained silent when truth demanded a voice, he betrayed himself. Stoics have long taught that the soul becomes sick when it strays from nature. What is a man's nature if not strength, clarity, and command of self? Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And indeed, the weak man suffers endlessly, not from what is done to him, but from what he refuses to do. How does this begin? It begins with a decision to avoid pain. Not pain from injury or hardship, but pain from truth. From saying what others don't want to hear. From being hated for being real. The weak man sees the cost of strength and chooses to defer it. He calls it diplomacy. He calls it humility. But it is neither. It is fear, disguised. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." But the weak man avoids the impediment. He avoids the wall. He avoids the weight. He sidesteps the very thing that would build him. He wants virtue without effort. Respect without resistance. But nothing of worth is earned in comfort. As time passes, the cost of weakness becomes unbearable. The world begins to reflect him back to himself. He is overlooked. Interrupted. Taken for granted. Women do not trust him. Not because he is evil, but because he is unable. Men do not follow him. Not because he is unworthy, but because he is soft. The world does not punish him with violence, it punishes him with indifference. And yet, even this does not awaken him. Because awakening requires pain deeper than embarrassment. It requires disgust. And eventually, he feels it. That moment when he cannot look at himself in the mirror without shame. Not for what he's done, but for what he has allowed. The tragedy is not that he was once weak. The tragedy is that he remained weak. Because strength is always possible. Discipline is always a choice. Dignity is always within reach. The man who blames the world for not respecting him is still asleep. The man who sees his reflection and says, "I permitted this," that man begins to wake. Epictetus reminds us, no man is free unless he is master of himself. But mastery begins with rebellion, against one's own cowardice. This is the turning point. The weak man must now face everything he has avoided. The boundaries he never set. The truth he never spoke. The resistance he never offered. The values he betrayed for the sake of harmony. The relationships he allowed to erode his character. He must feel the full weight of it. Not to drown in guilt, but to become alert. For pain, when guided by reason, is not destruction, it is fire. And in fire, iron is forged. Seneca wrote that, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. But the weak man never trained. He avoided labor. And so his mind, like his character, became fragile. To rebuild, he must suffer. Not publicly, but privately. In the hard quiet of dawn, where no one watches. Where no applause comes. Where only he knows whether he will rise or not. True respect begins here. Not from others, but from within. When a man stands up, not to prove anything to the world, but to himself. When he says, "Enough. Enough of the excuses. Enough of the softness. Enough of the appeasement. Enough of outsourcing his strength to circumstance." He begins by doing what the weak man never could, choosing pain over pleasure, truth over image, discipline over ease. From here, the process is brutal, but beautiful. He will feel shame. Let him. He will feel regret. Let him. But do not let him look away. For the man who looks away from his own weakness will never look forward with strength. The Stoics never promised ease. They promised clarity. And clarity always demands that we first see our own corruption before we attempt to rise. Strength does not begin with power. It begins with a decision. A silent, invisible decision, made in darkness, without witnesses, without certainty, and without guarantee of reward. The weak man, having seen what he has become, now stands at the mouth of a path he once avoided, the path of becoming. And this path has no map. The first step is renunciation. Not of comfort. But of permission. He must revoke the permission he gave himself to be ruled by ease. He must revoke the excuses that made his weakness acceptable. He must look himself in the eye and say, "I am no longer available for cowardice." This is not anger. This is not ego. This is discipline awakening. As Epictetus taught, freedom is the name of virtue, slavery, of vice. And what is vice, if not the constant surrender of the soul to impulses, fears, appetites, and approval? He has been a slave to all of them. But now, he tightens his grip, not on the world, but on himself. The world will not notice him yet. It doesn't need to. Respect begins not in the eyes of others, but in the spine of the man who no longer bows. His habits begin to change, not because someone is watching, but because he is. He speaks more clearly, not louder, but without fear. He stands more firmly, not with pride, but with purpose. He begins to say no, even when it shakes him. He welcomes discomfort, knowing that each moment of pain is training for the soul. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." The weak man never lived. He performed. He negotiated his identity day by day, sacrificing integrity for acceptance. But now, he breathes for the first time, not because it's easy, but because it's real. His environment begins to shift. People notice, not in admiration, but in tension. Some recoil. Some resist. Some grow silent around him. Why? Because weakness is comfortable, for others, too. And when a man rejects weakness, he becomes a threat, not just to their control, but to their illusion. He will be told, "You've changed. And he will answer, I had to. But he will also suffer greatly. Because power, like virtue, is forged in fire. He will lose the company of those who loved his softness. He will face the ghosts of past compromises. He will grieve the years wasted in cowardice. And yet, Seneca reminds us, it is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, it is because we do not dare that they are difficult. Now he dares. And in daring, he earns. He begins to build. Slowly. Daily. Without praise. His word becomes law, to himself. His rituals become sacred, even when unseen. His mind sharpens, no longer clouded by what others think of him, but focused on what he demands of himself. He stops chasing attention. He stops proving. He no longer begs for respect, because he now possesses what is more powerful, self-command. And with it comes an unexpected gift, peace. Not the peace of avoidance, but the peace of order. The peace that comes when a man stands in alignment with who he was made to be. He now lives by principles. Discomfort is necessary. Truth must be spoken. Strength must be chosen, daily. Respect must begin within. And fear must never rule again. The Stoics did not teach men to become invincible, they taught them to become immovable. To remain, as Marcus wrote, like a rock against which the waves continually break. The man rising from weakness is becoming this rock. Not through perfection. But through refusal. Refusal to betray himself ever again. Eventually, others begin to feel it. Not through words, but through presence. They feel that this man cannot be manipulated. That he does not perform. That he stands, even when alone. That his silence is not insecurity, but resolve. He becomes dangerous, not to others, but to falseness. He becomes useful, not to those who want obedience, but to those who seek strength. He becomes respected, not because he demanded it, but because he embodied it. And above all, he begins to respect himself. Not for what he has done, but for what he has reclaimed. This is the final realization. He never needed permission. He never needed applause. He never needed validation. He needed only one thing, to stop betraying the man inside. The man who waited, year after year, to be chosen. The man who could have spoken, acted, ruled, but was silenced by fear. The man who was buried under layers of, I'll try, I'm sorry, and, maybe tomorrow. No one respects the weak man. Not even himself. Because the weak man knows he was born for more. And he knows, he chose less. But now, this man has returned. And though the world may still misunderstand him, though some may call him harsh, though many will walk away, he does not walk away from himself. He is alone, but not lost. He is tested, but not broken. He is silent, but not afraid. He is a man again. And that is enough.